The Senate has passed for second reading the appropriation bill that seeks to withdraw 58.72 trillion naira from the Consolidated Revenue Fund for the 2026 fiscal year. Senators commended the priority spending on security, education, and health. They also applauded the proposed spending of 23 trillion naira on capital expenditure amid calls for effective legislative oversight. The Senate had earlier repealed and reenacted the 2024 and 2025 Appropriation Act, extending the validity of both fiscal documents, while the validity of the 2024 budget with a total expenditure of 43.56 trillion naira is extended to 31st December 2025. The lifespan of the 2025 budget is extended till the 31st of March 2026, when the 2026 budget is expected to take effect. Well, economist Gbolahan Olojede joins us now to discuss the 2026 budget as presented by President Tinubu, the operations of multiple budgets, and the plan for harmonization, in addition to exploring the fundamentals of 2026 budget estimates. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Easy.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
So how feasible is the 2026 budget considering the macroeconomic assumptions underpinning it?
I think the assumptions this time were much more realistic than what we had in the previous year. In the previous year, I think benchmark oil was $70. It never smelled 70, literally all true. But what we have in this paper, in 2026, is 64.85. That's a lot more reasonable. We had over 2,000, million barrels. Over 2 million barrels per day as production last year. This year is about 1.8, so that's a bit more conservative. So I would say we're a bit more conservative this year, more realistic than what we had in the previous year. So other things being equal, we should be more effective in how much we realize and probably how we deploy the fund in the current year. In 2026 rather.
Would you say that all the sectors, the biggest sectors, received what they need or they needed? That's in alignment with what our priority should be at this time?
As to whether they got what they needed or what they need, it's a matter of trying to share 2 chicken laps among 3 elders. It will always be a problem, because we don't truly have enough. So as it were, of course, the number one seems to be is security, and it attracted the fattest cut in that budget. Education was also prioritized, and so is healthcare. But we're still far away from where we actually need to be. So maybe we're setting the foundation for, I would say, the right budget philosophy in the first instance. Because one of the major problems over the years that I have found out is that we don't even think that budget is a planning document. The approach of leadership, both at the NAS and at the executive, seems to be that it's just an authority to spend document. If you don't have it in the budget, you can't spend it in the first instance. So everybody wants to get things in that budget so that they can call it up later on in the course of the year and be able to spend. But a budget is a lot more than that. And if we change that philosophy, maybe it might help us to have something better.
Now, Nigeria has been operating multiple budgets concurrently. What specific problems has this practice caused for fiscal discipline and project implementation? And also, how realistic is the president's timeline to end the use of multiple budgets? I think it said on March 31st, 2026.
The multiple budget thing doesn't spell good for fiscal discipline, in my opinion. You see, if you have prepared a budget for last year, for whatever reason you've not been able to fully implement, you want to roll it into the new year, there's nothing from a budget preparation perspective that says you cannot consolidate what is left in the previous budget into the current budget and take it as a year's budget. So I had something that was meant to be 100 naira. I've deployed 70 naira. There's 30 naira remaining. I can put that in the current year's budget instead of saying, oh, it is previous year's budget, I'm rolling. What is all of that? We do budget in the private sector too, and it is not, it might be slightly different. Budgeting in the public sector is slightly different, but there is nothing that says we cannot learn from what the private sector is doing right and also, implement in the public sector. Like I said, the foundation is that we don't treat the budget as a true planning document, and we have to. If we treated it like the true planning document, we will have been mindful about rolling all sort of budgets into one, into another, about making $70 when there is no, your benchmark crude price, when there is nothing in the horizon that says you're going to get that amount. But you probably want to show that, okay, I can make this much income, and to be able to make that much income, I need to, show up what will create that income, even when it is unrealistic. It shows you are not planning. You're just putting up a document. So it is in the light of that, I will say 2026 looks better. Maybe we're beginning to get a reset, and we want to start making our budget a true planning document.
Well, I hope that's the case. Now, we often see that MDAs often fail to access or spend their allocations. Will harmonization address budget release and utilization problems?
Well, some of the releases do require certain conditions.
Okay.
And if you don't fulfill those conditions, then you can't tap into what is meant to be out there. But there are bigger worries about some of those issues. Bigger worries around even the revenue itself. If you've not forgotten, because it's so recent anyway, what the Minister of Finance said about how much of 2025 revenues actually came on the books. It's a bit on the low side, maybe 30% or less than 30% of what it's supposed to be. So it takes us back to that analogy that I gave before, where you have 3 elders at the seat, but you have 2 chicken laps. How do you begin to divide it? It's going to cause a lot of problems. So if you have budgeted that you're going to get 40 trillion and you got 10 trillion, cutting and dicing that will give you major challenges. But if you have been more realistic, and instead of saying, oh, I'm going to put 40 trillion, and you say, oh, it is 20 trillion that I'm shooting for, that is better. Next year, we'll see the implementation of a new tax law. And I want to believe that it could set a tone for an improved revenue base for this country. See, some years ago, I don't know if that has changed dramatically, when I used to be really, really interested in budget. And my benchmark for comparison is South Africa. The budget for education alone in South Africa used to be the size of the entire expenditure of the federal government of Nigeria. So we need to begin to ask ourselves, why is it possible for a country of 60 million people to have a budget that is 4 times that of Nigeria? It should get us curious, so that we begin to look at what is it that they are doing that we are not doing. We are both in Africa. In fact, at some point, we used to be the largest economy in Africa, while they came second. So the economy that came second, how come it is able to sweat its own GDP so that it generates 4 times the revenue that our own economy, even when it was a bigger GDP then, was only able to generate 25% of that revenue? So there are a lot of structural issues. Maybe the new tax law will help to address some of those issues, and we might begin to get on that journey to where we truly belong, in as far as space in Africa, where you're supposed to be in Africa, should be.
Okay. Now, debt servicing accounts for a significant share of the budget. What are the implications of 15.52 trillion naira allocated to debt service?
We've piled up debt over the years, and guess what? There will be more ahead. That entire amount is money that could have been deployed to other uses. It could have gone into infrastructure. It could have gone into some of those other budget heads. But because we are owing people, we must, you know the way the budget describes it is non-discretionary obligations. It's a non-discretionary. You don't have an option. You must first of all pay those things out. So it should challenge our capacity to look into the future and dig deeper for where all the income will come from, so that we can reduce or we can better manage the debt profile, or we can make our debt profile not to go out of sustainability. The issue is that it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen one day. It happens over a long period, day by day, month by month of increased borrowing, for which we're not keeping on top of what it is. As it is today, it's easy to say, well, it's still about less than 5% of our GDP. That's small, you know. That's even the fiscal deficit anyway. But then, it's not just about GDP. It's also about the revenue. You can have a fat GDP, like we used to have the biggest GDP in Africa. But in spite of our biggest GDP in Africa, we were only able to put on the table a revenue that is only 25% of what South Africa, which did not have a GDP as big as ours then, was able to make.
Wow. Using South Africa as a basis of comparison is definitely is a wake-up call for our country, and I really hope that we do the needful. Thank you so much for your insightful analysis. Economist Gbolahan Olojede, thank you for joining us here on Newsday.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.